What's going on, you guys? Welcome to another episode of Around the NBA, a podcast where I get my thoughts on the latest news, transactions, teams, and players across the league. So for this week's episode, I got a couple of different topics for you guys. I got a little bit of tea, some drama in the NBA, and a couple of other topics. One of them I wanted to talk about last week, but I knew if I went into it, it was towards the end of the episode. I was going to really extend myself, and I try to keep my episodes under an hour. And if I went into that conversation, I knew I wasn't going to keep it under an hour. So in the middle of while I was recording last week, I literally had a thought. I'm like, yeah, I can't get into that because it's going to be really, really long. So I'm going to talk about that topic that I wanted to in last week. And then my final topic is Michael Jordan. Can Michael Jordan average 50 in today's league? So the first topic of this week's episode is, like I said, a little bit of tea coming out of the NBA, and it's involving Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka. Now, I'm sure you guys have probably already read, heard, seen the story of what's happening to him, and he's facing a year-long suspension from the league, from what it appears to be and I quote, "an consensual, inappropriate relationship with a female staffer for the Boston Celtics." So apparently, Ime was having a relationship with, I don't know who she is. They just said staffer, so I'm not exactly sure how she's involved with the organization. But what I haven't really read or seen on the story is if this is a league-wide protocol or if it's just a Boston Celtics protocol. From what I've read, it seems like it's just an internal thing because they are handling everything, but at the same time, it could be a league-wide protocol. You can't have a relationship with someone within the same organization. That's just my assumption. However, whichever is the case, it does not look good for Udoka in his career and in his personal life, because if you guys need a reminder, he is married. And if you guys remember some of the memes that were coming out last season in the playoffs of people saying he's winning on and off the court because of who he's married to. Again, if you guys need a reminder, he is married to none other than Nia Long. So this is not good for Ime. It just seems like he, as people were saying, he was winning off the court. It seems like he wasn't winning enough. No, like in all seriousness, that's pretty bad. But in all seriousness, man, I feel bad for his wife Nia, who now has to go through this situation. Obviously, we don't know what's going on in their personal life and their personal relationship, or if they're really together, if they were separate. That's outside of the realm of what I really want to talk about, because I'm only focused on the basketball part. But yeah, man, it just doesn't look good for Ime. It seems like he's for sure going to be suspended for the season, and potentially, from what I've read, is he's considering resigning as a head coach, which would really be a blow to the Celtics organization, because he is a very good coach. I know last season they started off kind of cold. Going into January, they were like at 500, but they finished the season strong, and they finished top 3 in the East, and they made it to the NBA Finals. And due to the acquisitions that they made this offseason, I was really high on the Boston Celtics coming into the season. But now with this news and this breaking story of their head coach, I don't know what they're going to look like next season. Now, obviously, they have a replacement. I don't know who it is. He's a current staffer for the team already. He's already an assistant coach, but I'm not exactly sure who he is or what he's done in the past. But, the reason why I was so high on them is because they did improve as a unit, and because of Ime. Like, they have a really good coach. He's like one of 5 head coaches in the last, I think, 30 years that made it to the NBA Finals as a rookie head coach. So obviously he knows what he's doing, and obviously he knows the game, right? So it's a huge blow for the Boston Celtics. And if I'm a Celtics fan, yes, I'm frustrated and disappointed, but at the same time, my hope isn't all gone for this upcoming season, because we do have a really good squad. but I am going to be a little bit skeptical because of this new head coach, and I don't know what he's capable of, and I don't know who he is really. So that that changes a lot for this upcoming season, not just for them but the whole league. The whole Eastern Conference. Like, I have them at number 2 coming into the season, as I mentioned in my last episode, with possibility of being number 1 if you wanted to flip them because they did win the Eastern Conference Finals. I still have the Milwaukee Bucks ahead of them, but they were still a top 2, top 3 team for sure. Can the change of a head coach really make a difference? Yeah. I mean, head coaches matter. Head coaches can be the difference between winning and losing. I mean, look at Golden State a few seasons ago. I mean, it's been more than a few seasons now. But when they had Mark Jackson's a heck of a coach. But Steve Kerr comes in, and yeah, they already have a nicely built franchise and a nicely built team, and he was able to turn them into winners, right? Like, they were contenders, and then once Steve Kerr got there, like, he made them to championships, or to champions. So head coaches matter. Same thing with Cleveland Cavaliers when they had David Blatt. They had a solid squad. He had them contenders, and then they get Tyronn Lue, and then they win a championship. So absolutely, head coaching matters. So maybe they get lucky and they get this new head coach, and he turns them into contenders, into champions. But they are already kind of on the cusp of being champions. So we'll see. So for the Boston Celtics, man, it is a huge blow. But because of how good their squad is, we'll see how this new head coach handles the situation. But yeah, man, I feel sorry for the team. As an organization wise, I can see why they'd be embarrassed, and I can see why he himself would be embarrassed, and he doesn't want to handle that situation and rather just step away from it and maybe resigns. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the case for him in the situation. And I wouldn't blame him because, you don't want that attention moving forward. But if he is suspended for the whole year, by the time he comes back, that could be blown, right? Like, he could have handled that situation and everything could be fine in a year from now. But obviously, he's not going to come back right now, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, we'll see what happens. If he decides to resign, then, it's going to be interesting to see what the Boston Celtics do moving forward, and trying to find a replacement. But yeah, as far as this season goes, Ime looks like he's out for the season due to suspension, and the Boston Celtics year is now up in the air. Just like some of your guys' chances, if you guys ever thought about dating Neil Long, it's a possibility now. So now moving on to the next topic of conversation. So this topic was the one that I wanted to get into last week, but because of time, I didn't. But I thought it was going to be a good segue into this topic because I was going to try to follow it up with, after I give my reaction to the clip that I put of the great Deion Sanders of his take on the NFL Hall of Fame and how he feels it's a little bit watered down, essentially is what he was saying. And I correlated that to the Basketball Hall of Fame and how I feel about that. And how Deion Sanders feels about the NFL Hall of Fame is how I feel about the Basketball Hall of Fame. I do think it's a little bit watered down, and I do think it's easy to get into. Now, I'm not going to get too much into detail about that because I already did that last week. But the reason why I felt like it was a good segue into this conversation was because it's about Manu. And Manu Ginobili was recently inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And Manu is definitely one of those players that deserves to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Like, he definitely left a legacy, definitely left an impact in the league, and he definitely was impactful to his team when he was in the league, and it led to 4 championships. Now, I'm not saying he was the reason for 4 championships, but I'm saying he was a part of a team, and he contributed to a team that won 4 championships with him on it. So before I get into the topic, congratulations, Manu. You deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Not that he's ever going to listen to this, but still, I wanted to give him his flowers. I'm pretty sure I've done this before. I love Manu. I love him as a player. I love him as a person, like just who he is. I've never met him. So that's kind of came off as like, I know who Manu is. I don't know who Manu is personally, but I like him as a player. I loved him as a player. I loved watching him play. It was fun to watch, just because of the different things he was able to do on the court. And just as him as a human being, like he just seems like a genuinely good, nice person. So congratulations, Manu, on making the Hall of Fame. Now, the topic that I wanted to get into was this debate that I've been seeing for at least the last month or two, of Klay Thompson and Manu Ginobili and who's better. Now, before I get into it, the only the only real podcast I've seen discuss this is Player's Choice. So shout out to Player's Choice. And the reason I'm doing this is because I know they've had their beef and their squanders with other podcasts for taking their topics and taking their ideas. So I don't want to have a beef with Player's Choice. And I'm giving them credit where credit is due for this topic so they don't come looking for me later. But the topic of conversation is Manu versus Klay. And, the debate that I've been seeing is who's better, right? And that's kind of what I'm going to focus on because you guys know that I view better and greater differently. So in terms of greatness, it's hard to say who's greater because the way I value greatness, they both left an impact to their rosters, right? And they were both very impactful to their teams, and they were both very important pieces to winning championships. They also both have 4 championships. They have the same amount of rings. The thing that maybe would separate them, well, this is where it gets difficult because Klay Thompson is also labeled for sure a top 3 shooter of all time. So people have him number 2. I have him number 3. I think I have Ray Allen ahead of him all time. But if you said Klay Thompson's a better shooter than Ray Allen, I'm not going to be mad at that. But he's for sure top 3 shooter of all time, and that's a hard accomplishment to come by. That's a hard thing to achieve, right? So in terms of leaving a legacy or leaving an impact to the league, like Klay Thompson definitely has that. But I think Manu has 2 different things that is the reason why I would put him ahead of Klay Thompson in terms of greatness. So the first one being he embraced the 6th man role, right? Like he took that role, even though he could be a starter in this league and he could be a potential star in this league, but he embraced being a 6th man and coming off the bench and sacrificing that in order for his team to win. So he is the ultimate, person to look up to for sacrifice in order to win. Like Manu was that guy, and he sacrificed a lot in order to win championships, and he embraced that 6-man role, and he arguably is the greatest 6-man player we have ever seen, at least personally to me. I think he is definitely the best 6-man player we've ever seen. And the other thing is he really pioneered the Euro step in the league. Like up until Manu, there wasn't really anybody in the league that was really using that as kind of a signature move. That kind of became Manu's signature move. And no one's going to call it, the Manu step. Not to say like I do, I call it the Manu step. No, it's called the Euro step, but he was really the pioneer for that move. And now we see players like James Harden really use it in the game. And even sometimes, other players obviously, but James Harden is the biggest one that comes to mind. So because he really embraced that 6-man role and he became the greatest 6-man player we've ever seen, and he really pioneered a basketball move in this league, that's leaving an impact as well. So because of those 2 things, because of his championships, he does have a 6-man of the year award. Now, that's not fair to Klay because Klay's never come off the bench, but he does have that hardware. That's why I would put him over the edge. Mostly the 2 things that I mentioned, the Euro step and the 6-man role, and not just a 6-man award, of why I would put him over Klay Thompson in terms of greatness. Now, in terms of better, who is better between Klay Thompson and Manu Ginobili? And I think it's the same person. I think Manu Ginobili is a better basketball player than Klay Thompson. I just think he's more skilled. He is more talented than Klay Thompson. Now, if you want to break it down in terms of individual skills, sure. I think Klay Thompson's a better shooter, and I think he's a slightly better defender. Well, I'm not going to say slightly. He is a better defender. The reason I was going to say slightly is because I do think Klay Thompson is an overrated defender, but he is a better defender than Manu. Manu's an above-average defender. He was a solid defender, but Klay Thompson is more than a solid defender. He was a good defender. I just think people overrate his defense. I've heard people label him as an elite, terrific, all-time great defender, and he was never that, right? Like, I don't know if he was ever a top 5 defender in this league. He may not even been a top 10. Now, I'm not going to go too much into depth of that because I can't think of top 10. And it just depends on the year, right, that you want to label them. But just a couple of names that come to mind. I don't think he's ever good as Paul George in his peak, Jimmy Butler in his peak, Kawhi Leonard in his peak, Tony Allen in his peak, even Drew Holiday right now. Like, I don't think he was ever better defenders than any of those guys. And that's 5 off the top of my head. So I do think Klay is a good defender. I just don't think he's as great as everybody labels him to be. But in terms of shooting, Klay definitely's got him. And defense, he's got him. Now, some will say scoring. I could see that, but I would give the edge to Manu because of his versatility. Now, I know some people are going to be like, wait. You don't value versatility like all that much. Well, Klay Thompson is very much like as good of a shooter he is. He's very, I'm not going to say one-dimensional because he can cut to the basket and he does have some sort of a mid-range game, but a lot of it's just a pump fake from 3, get into his spot in the mid-range and hit a pull-up jumper. Right? It's not like a mid-range game like a Kobe or a Kawhi or MJ, right? So I'm not going to say he's got a mid-range game, but in terms of versatility, I would give that to Manu. And I just would value Manu's skill set more overall, right, than what Klay is able to bring to the table. Now, in today's NBA, I think Klay could be more valuable because of his ability to shoot the 3. But Manu was a pretty solid 3-point shooter. Like, he was shooting 4 to 5 threes in his prime, and he was shooting like 36, 37, even 38% from the field, or from 3, I believe. So that's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. But in terms of versatility score and who's a better scorer overall, I'm going to Manu. Passer, Manu. Ball handler, Manu. Playmaker, Manu. Now, rebounding, they're both not good rebounders, right? Like, I'm not going to say, like, oh, they're both shooting guards. Like, to say one's a better rebounder than the other is kind of nasty because they're both not that great of defenders. So I'm not going to say who's a better rebounder. But overall, just skill, I think, and talent, I think Manu's got him beat. And I think Manu would be a better number 1 option than Klay Thompson would on any team. Now, some might say, like, that's not a fair knock, or that's not, how do you know that? Because neither of them were ever number 1 options. But just the type of game that Manu brings to the table, I think would be a better fit as a number 1 option. And I guess I do value that a little bit more when I say who's better. But Klay Thompson, definitely, can he be a number 1 option? I don't know. Like, I don't think he'd be as good of a number 1 option as Ray Allen was. And Ray Allen was a terrific shooter, but he was just a versatile scorer. He was able to carry a team, Milwaukee, and even the Seattle Sonics. I was going to say the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Sonics. Right, but I do think Manu would be a better number 1 option to carry a team just because of the skills and the individual talents he brings as an individual. But yeah, I just think who is better between Klay Thompson and Manu? I think it's Manu. And I'm not going to say it's not close because that's disrespecting Klay. As much as I do think that Klay is overrated and just in general, I do think Manu is the better player. Now, the one thing I don't understand people really debating is like flip-flopping them. Like, I don't understand why people use this argument to debate who's better. Like, some of the arguments I was hearing, well, how successful would Golden State be with Manu instead of Klay? Like, that's not a good way to gauge who's better, right? Like, that, it just isn't. it just is not a good. That's not a good gauge because the Golden State Warriors built that team around Steph Curry and they knew Klay Thompson, like that piece, right? So I don't think that's a good way to gauge. But some people are saying, well, they would be just as fine, they'd just be as successful. I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know if Golden State would be just as successful with Manu as they were with Klay. Now, when they had Kevin Durant, sure, probably, because you can fit almost any like really good player on that squad and they would win. But replacing Klay with like this year's team with Manu, maybe 2015, that's a little bit tougher. Like, I don't know if they win without Klay. And even 2016 when they made the finals. Obviously they lost, but I don't know if they make the finals without Klay. It's just hard to gauge. That's hard to say, right? So I'm not going to go as far to say, well, yeah, they would be just as successful with Manu, because I don't know. Would they be a very good team still? Yes. But some people are saying, well, yeah, he could develop, he become a better shooter. Well, yes, but will he become a shooter as good as Klay Thompson? No. Like, I don't see that happening. As good of a shooter as he was, and he was a solid shooter, but I don't think he'd become as good of a 3-point shooter as Klay Thompson was. Like you were talking about, he would be a top 3 shooter of all time. I don't see Manu doing that. I don't. So I don't get this debate of would Golden State be just as successful with Manu as he was with Klay. Like, I get people are talking about it to have a conversation, but I just don't see the point of it. And same thing like flip-flopping and putting Klay on the Golden State. I don't know if they're just as successful. Maybe. But I that's hard to gauge. So I'm not going to use that to say one is better than the other. Like, the Spurs would be more successful with Klay than Golden State would be with Manu. Like, that's not a good way to gauge who's better. So I'm not going to get into that. So overall, who is the better player between Manu Ginobili and Klay Thompson? To me, it's Manu. So my final topic of conversation is this debate, or this argument rather, this conversation that I've been seeing of Michael Jordan. And I've been seeing it for a while. I think for almost like a year, and I don't recall discussing this ever on the show, but I wanted to because I got into a little debate on social media, on YouTube, in the YouTube comments over this, and it's about Michael Jordan, and again, it comes from a Player's Choice podcast where someone said that Michael Jordan would average 50 today. You guys know this. You guys know that I do have Michael Jordan as the greatest basketball player to ever live, which I need to get into later because I have to confess something about my top 10 players of all time. It's changed a little bit, and I'm gonna do that later. I'm gonna do that in a later episode, so I'm not gonna get too much into that now. But Michael Jordan to me is the greatest basketball player of all time. When people say stuff like this, that he would average 50 in today's NBA, that's just all nostalgia based to me, man. Like, because the people who are saying this are either LeBron haters or huge Jordan stans. And I used to be a huge LeBron hater. And I'm not saying I'm a LeBron fan now, but I've just come to appreciate, as older as I got, I learned to appreciate players for different aspects, and just learn to, like, you know what, if I love this game of basketball, why knock players, right? Except for Melo. But but for real, like, Michael Jordan was before my time. So I can't sit here and say, like, I was a huge Jordan fan or I love Michael Jordan. I'm not even a huge fan of his shoes, to be quite honest with you. But to me, like, yes, Michael Jordan he's the greatest player of all time. Like, I've seen games, obviously. I've seen him play. I've seen a lot of his finals on NBA.com. Got to get that league pass, you know what I'm saying? So, obviously, I know Michael Jordan. I know what he was capable of, and I know what he did for this NBA and what he did for this league. But to say that Michael Jordan would average 50 in today's NBA is nothing but nostalgia. And the reasons I hear this is because, there's a lot more spacing in today's NBA, and he would get to the rim so easily, and da-da-da-da-da. That may be true. Like, those things are true, right? Like, there is more spacing. Like, he would be able to get to the rim easier and what have you. The defenses, in terms of, I think individually, I think there's a lot more defensive talent today than there was when Jordan was playing. But in terms of schemes and stuff like that, it's harder because of how widespread the floor is, right? But there's a couple of things that I think people are just completely ignoring, right? What is the biggest thing in today's NBA? Like, why is this floor so spread today? Because you got to be able to shoot, right? And not just be able to shoot, you got to be able to shoot threes. Jordan was never like a 3-point shooter. Like, he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't, I wouldn't even say above average. like ever. That there was a couple of seasons where he shot like 40%, and there was one season where he shot 50%. But he was never a terrific like 3-point shooter, right? Like that wasn't his game. And the 3-point line was a little bit closer back then than it is today. So I, being the stat guy that I am, I decided to crunch some numbers, okay? And I'm going to break this down to you guys logically, at least try to break this down logically, and tell you why Jordan would not be able to average 50 in today's NBA. So in today's NBA, right, I looked up who is taking the most field goals attempts per game and how much is it. Well, in today's NBA, technically the league leader last season was LeBron James at 21.8 shots a game. But because he missed a lot of time, I don't think he really qualified for being a league leader in anything. So it was Luka who averaged 21.6. So technically it was LeBron, but it's actually Luka. Regardless, they were both over 21.5. So basically 22 shots a game. Okay. So I'm going to give Michael Jordan, the league leader in today's NBA in field goal attempts, 22 shots a game. Okay. Now, who shot the most threes in today's NBA? Well, it was Steph Curry. And he shot 11.7 threes a game. So I'm going to round that up to 12. Right? And now you're asking, like, Jordan shooting 12 threes a game? I'm doing this for a reason. Okay? I'm doing this for a purpose. I'm going to max him out in a lot of these stuff so you guys can see something. Okay? So the most threes a game was 12 in this season. It was Steph. So I'm going to give Jordan 12 threes a game. So he's got 22 field goals. Out of those 22 field goals, 12 of those are threes. Now, who led the league in free throws this past season? Well, it was Joel Embiid. He averaged 11.8 free throws per game. So I'm going to give Jordan 12 free throws a game. Okay, so he's got 22 field goals. 12 of those are threes. 12 shots from the line. Okay. Now, let's look at Jordan's career highs and percentages for each of those categories. Okay. So, from the three, I'm going to give him his max. And this was in 95 when he only played 17 games when he came back after playing baseball. All right. He shot 50% from three. Only 17 games. Shot 50% from three. So I'm going to give him 50% from three off 12 3-point attempts. Okay. Now that leaves him with 10 shots from within the arc. Okay. So his career high from two was in 1989, was 55.3% from the field. Now, his career high from free throws was in 1987, and he shot 85.7% from the field. Okay? So 50% from three, 55.3% from two, and 85.7% from the line. Okay? So I crunched the numbers on this. Okay? So I gave him max field goal shots in today's NBA, max 3-point shots in today's NBA, max free throws in today's NBA, his max percentages for his career. Okay? So this is how it breaks down. He would score 10.28 points from the line. He would shoot 11.06 points from the field, from inside the arc, and he would shoot 18 points from three. You add that all up, it's only 39 points per game. So Jordan wouldn't even average 40 in today's NBA. By giving him the max amount of field goal attempts, by giving him the max amount of 3-point attempts, and by giving him the max amount of free throw attempts, and by giving him his max amount of percentages in each of those categories, he's only averaging 39 points per game. So he wouldn't even average 40. Not even 40. Okay? And that's not even realistic because I'm giving him 12 threes a game. Jordan's not shooting 12 threes a game in today's NBA, folks. Okay? 12 threes a game. He's not shooting 12 threes a game. So what's a more realistic aspect? Okay, what if we gave him, okay, well, let's say LeBron, right? Let's look at LeBron and Luka. How many threes a game did they shoot? Well, LeBron shot 8 threes a game and Luka shot 8.8 threes a game. So I'll give him 9. Let's give him 9 threes a game. So Jordan shooting 9 threes a game off his 50% from the field. He's still only averaging 34.5 points per game. So now we're under 35 points per game. That's a more realistic approach. Now, I'm still even giving him 50% from the field off 9 threes. So again, not really realistic. So what if we make this more realistic? Okay? I'm going to give him his next highest three-point percentage, which was in 1996. It was at 42.7%. That was a more realistic season. He played a lot more games than 17. Okay? So he shot 42.7% from three. And let's face it, Jordan's not going to shoot 9 threes a game. So what's a more realistic approach? I would say he'd probably shoot around 6 to 5, maybe. And that's max. And that's like Kawhi Leonard level of shooting. Okay, that's what I'm giving him in today's NBA. If he shot 7 threes or 6 threes a game, he's only averaging 29 points per game. If I give him 5 off that 3-point percentage, he's only averaging 27.7 points per game. So he's under 28 points per game. Like this nostalgia that Jordan would average 50 in today's NBA, he wouldn't even average 40 in today's NBA. And I'm just being realistic here. Because what NBA player in today's NBA, as good of a shooter as Steph Curry is, as great of a scorer as Kevin Durant is, none of them are getting near 40. The only one was James Harden, and that was like 2018, 2017 when he averaged 36 a game. And that was like his peak. And that's the most we've ever seen in this era. So what's a more realistic points per game that Jordan would average today? I'd probably give him like 28 to 30 a game. Realistically. Now, he would have to shoot a lot more than 22 field goals a game, in my opinion, to get that. So in today's NBA, the most that someone's shooting is 22 field goals a game. So in order for him to average his 30 or above, he'd have to be in a team where he's just going to have the green light. Like, he's not going to be really in a winning team. He's just not. This isn't 1990. Like, in order for your floor to be spread out, you need to have shooters around. And in order for that to be effective, you got to give them the ball to shoot. Which is why players today are only taking 22 field goals a game on average, right? So like LeBron he shot 22 shots a game this past season, and he was playing for a team that didn't make the playoffs. Luka, who's the next guy up there, like he made the playoffs, right? And he only shot 22 field goals attempts a game, right? And he's on a winning team. They made the Western Conference Finals. So in order for Jordan to average his 30 plus, he'd have to take 24, 25 shots maybe, anywhere with more than 22 for sure, and he'd be on a losing team. Like, he wouldn't be on a winning team. So this notion that, now, could he score 50 in a game? Yeah, sure. Like, Devin Booker dropped 70 in a game. Klay Thompson scored 60 in a game. Like, he can easily drop 50 in a game. Sure. Can he average 50 in a game or in a season this in today's NBA? No. I don't even believe he would average 40 in today's NBA. I think the max that he would average is probably somewhere between 30 and 35. But again, it wouldn't be on a winning team. So if Jordan wants to win in today's NBA, he'd only be around 27 to 29, maybe 30 points per game in order for his team to win. That's him on a winning team. So would Jordan average 50 in today's NBA? No. He wouldn't even average 40. Could he score 50 in today's NBA? Absolutely. But in order to average those high numbers, he's going to have to shoot a lot. He's going to have to shoot a lot of threes. And Jordan was never a three-point shooter. So let's dead this notion. Let's dead this nostalgia-based argument that Jordan would average 50, because he wouldn't. Sorry. Just not happening. And that's going to be it for this episode, you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe on wherever you're listening from. You guys can follow me on all my social media platforms at @AroundTheNBA_podcast. But other than that, man, take it easy, and I'll see you guys next week.